Good morning, everyone. It's kind of tough to follow Sunil because he's given us so much. He's actually set up my topic beautifully in terms of reputation management by building a very beautiful connection between brands and reputation, right? So you'll see I started off with a slide that only has brands on it, and my topic is all about reputation management. And I think Sunil's made it very clear to us why those two things are intrinsically linked in the customer's minds. So how do you go about managing your reputation? I think first I want to place three concepts in front of you. And I think it's useful to think about your reputation in these three dimensions. First dimension is your identity. So very simply, your identity is what people say about you when you're in the room. Right? This is what people say to you, to your face. So your identity can be, he's a really nice guy. Your identity can be, he really knows a lot about markets. Your identity can be like mine is, I love dogs. You know, identity can be whatever it is, but it's what people say about you when they are in front of you. Your reputation, on the other hand, is what people say about you behind your back. And it's very important to know that it's quite often that you don't know your own reputation because it's about what people are saying about you when you're not in the room. So you hear it in the ether, you hear it on social media, you hear it all around you. But it's very rare that someone will come and tell you, this is what I think about you. And where does brand management come in? Brand management is that amalgam, which is what do I want people to say about me when I'm not in the room, right? So you can either manage your reputation by managing your brand, or you can allow your reputation just to be built. So if you want your identity and your reputation to be the same, which is you want people to say the same things to you, to your face, that they say once you've left the room, then building your brand is the key to doing that. So in my mind, brand building is reputation management. And you know, there is value in a brand. Sunil talked about some of the things that make a brand valuable. But I don't know if you know, I know many of you will know this, there is actually a brand value survey that is done, which quantifies the financial value of a brand. And these are some of the world's most valuable brands. Sunil mentioned some of them, right? He mentioned Apple. But Google, Microsoft. It's quite interesting, by the way, if you look at the US stock market today, many of these most valuable brands are also some of the most valuable companies in the world. So I think clearly there is value in a brand. Now we're sitting here in an MFD conference called CIFA 2020. So I'm not allowed to say IFA, but we're sitting here in a room full of small business owners and entrepreneurs. And therefore the question in all of your mind is, why the heck is this guy standing up there and talking to me about the biggest and most valuable companies in the world? And the reason for that is that a brand is not necessarily only a company. What a brand gives you is a tagline or a reputation. So if you think about Disney, you think about character. You think about Tatas, you think about integrity. If you think about Colgate, you'll think about trust, right? They say we're the most recommended toothpaste brand by dentists around the world. If you think about Rolex, it's credibility. You buy a Rolex watch, you get a sense of brand purpose with it. If you buy a Mercedes-Benz, you're expecting reliability. Right? How many of you have driven by and seen a Mercedes broken down and said, that's surprising. I don't expect that car to break down when I'm driving it. And when it's Apple, it's about usability and likability. So each brand has an identity, each brand has a reputation, each brand has a promise. And as investors, as customers, as consumers, we look up to that brand for that promise that it is giving us. And we have to remember, people are brands as well. And that's why I keep talking about the concept of a brand. A brand is not just a company. All of you have a brand. In the financial services world, these are some of the biggest brands. So John Templeton, Warren Buffett, Peter Lynch, Mark Mobius, and then outside our world, somebody like a Steve Jobs or a Bill Gates. These are all brands. They all stand for something. So the question that now comes to us is, why is branding important? Because people have very little time. So if people have to make a choice, if people have to make a selection, they have a plethora of choices and very little time in which to make the choice. And so quite often, we're making our choices as consumers and users on the basis of the brand promise that we see. And so if you want your customers to choose you, then the question is, what is the brand promise that you are making, which is equal to what is the reputation that you have, and therefore why should someone want to work with you as an MFD or as an advisor? And I completely agree with what Sunil said. It really doesn't matter what you are labeled under regulation. It really matters what your customer labels you, because that is all about your reputation. So what do you want to be? I think that's the first thing you have to decide. If you want to establish your brand and build your reputation, I think you're going to first have to decide, what do you want to be known as? Do you want to be known as an expert in financial markets? Do you want to be known as someone who's a great mentor in terms of financial planning? Are you someone who is an advisor? Are you someone who is a guide? First, you have to know what you want to be called. Once you've decided that, then you can set about building your brand. And let's now look at some best practices, tips, topics in terms of how you can go about building your brand as an individual business owner, as an entrepreneur, as someone who runs a small business, not as an Apple or a Google who's got multi-billion dollars to spend and therefore can build their brand through lots of advertising. So there are some do's in brand building, and by the way, there are some very important don'ts as well, in my view, in terms of reputation management. The first thing is, you have to let people know what you stand for. And more important than that, you have to stick to it. So one of the best practices I've seen when I've been traveling and talking to advisors is there are actually advisors who will put out something that says, or an MFD, sorry, I can't get over that IFA term, it is ingrained in us. There are people out there who consciously will tell people, if you work with me for your financial needs, this is what I will do for you. And by the way, this is what I will not do for you. Right? For example, I only sell mutual fund products. I will not sell you, let's say, a structured product. Whatever it is that you decide, or I will look after your financial needs, but I'm not going to be able to do your estate planning and your will planning. Or I can do everything for you, for your whole family. So whatever it is that you say you will do, you have to tell people. They will experience it, but if you tell them, they can put it together, right? This is what someone said they will do for me. This is what they actually did. That aligns with my brand promise. So that's the first thing, and most importantly, you have to stick to it. You can't say one thing and do the other. Next, don't offer facts, offer a point of view. People are coming to you because you know something that they don't know. They're looking for you to help them make a decision. They're looking for you to be an expert, so you have to give them a point of view. Whether that point of view is right or wrong, only history can tell us. We don't know that today, but you have to have a point of view. What you say about others says a lot about you, and I have a firm belief in this. The less you talk about others and the more you talk about yourself, the better your brand will be and the better your reputation will be. Building a brand basis denigrating somebody else, in my opinion, has never worked, and negative marketing has never taken off unless it has been executed extremely well in the world. You have to listen to what others are saying about you. It's very, very important that you listen across platforms. And I say across platforms because today, much of what is said about you, so in the good old days, it was actually quite easy, right? You spoke to 5 people, you said nice things about someone or bad things about someone, they spoke to 3 people. It was a nice controlled circle. Today, there is no control. Someone can put something out on Twitter, someone can put something out on Facebook, someone can put something out on LinkedIn, and it becomes the truth. And how do you manage that? So it's very, very important, as even Sunil said, that you listen to what your brand is telling you in the public domain. You have to engage when the going is good, engage more when the going is tough. This is another very, very important tenet, I think, for all of us in the financial services industry. Quite often, when the market has been going one way, portfolio returns have been going the other way, we're tempted to say, what am I going to say to the client? The client is going to ask me why my portfolio is at 8% when the market is at 18%. I don't have a good answer to them. And we get shy because we don't think that there is anything meaningful that we can say to the customer. But actually, the simple act of engaging with the customer and reaching out is far more important than whether you're able to give the client a very logical explanation about why their portfolio has done worse or their portfolio has done better. You need to respond to all customers and you have to take feedback from them. It's very important that you ask for feedback. And if someone has something that they want to tell you, you have to not only accept it, you have to respond to it. Today we live in an instantly connected world. We've moved away from even phone calls to emails and WhatsApps. WhatsApp is the most common business communication tool today. What does it mean? In the good old days, if you were not there to answer the phone, you could call back 1 hour later, 2 hours later, 5 hours later, next day. Today you can't do that, right? The moment someone sends you a WhatsApp, they can see if it's delivered to your phone, and the moment you read it, they can tell if you have read it or not. So your response time has become instant today. And so people expect a response and they expect an instant response. And testimonials are awards. Ask them and flaunt them. Many of you have websites. I don't know how many of you ask for customer testimonials. As manufacturers, we're not allowed to do that. We're not allowed to take client testimonials, but you are. Imagine, we're a social community, right? We're a bunch of social people. So if someone comes on your website and sees nice testimonials about real stories of customers that you've helped, imagine what kind of a positive impact that can have on your brand when someone is looking for you. There are also some don'ts. Some things you absolutely should not do, in my opinion, at least in building a brand. You can't neglect social media. 50% of new investors in this industry are millennials. But social media is a double-edged sword. Going overboard on social media can also be a big challenge. It's very, very important to know when you stop, right? So I don't believe there is any place for competitor negativity in public. And I don't believe there is any place for argument in public. Right? I'm a firm believer that you should put out nice information in public and argue in private. Because if you're going to argue with your customers in public, that is going to end up creating an even more negative impression. Handle negative publicity with extreme care and don't ignore your unhappy customers. Now I'll tell you where this comes to play in a real life example. How many of you use TripAdvisor or a platform like that to do your research, right? Many people use it. Now, when I go on TripAdvisor and I look for a hotel, the first thing I do is I go click on the negative reviews. So first of all, you don't want more negative than positive reviews, right? That's fairly clear. But if there's a restaurant, a hotel or whatever which has 100 positive reviews and 5 negative reviews, the first thing I do is I click on the negative review. Not because I'm worried about the negative review, but I want to see whether whoever was the owner of that establishment cared enough to read the review, to respond to the review, to graciously accept the feedback and make a change. And if I can see that trend, I'm happy to patronize that establishment. But if I see that establishment arguing with its customers to say, oh, you're the only one who had a bad experience, we've never heard this before, we've always got fantastic reviews, you're being unnecessarily harsh, that for me is a red flag. And that's why I think it's so important to be careful about how you handle social media, how you handle criticism, and how you handle unhappy customers. So, I talked about what all of these brands stand for right in the beginning. My question to you is, do you know what your brand stands for today? Have you bothered to listen to your brand perception out there? Do you know what your reputation is in the market? And if you don't, then measure your brand, right? And you'll ask me, how can I, as an individual who doesn't have lots of money to spend, how am I going to go out and do a survey to measure my brand? But actually, you don't have to do any kind of surveys. Measuring your brand, you can ask one of two very simple questions. Sir, I've been looking after your money for the last so many years. Would you be happy to give me a testimonial for my website? Simple question. Or, sir, I've been managing your money, or ma'am, I've been managing your money for so many years. Would you be happy to give me a referral to one of your customers? And the answer to those two simple questions can tell you where your brand reputation lies. If they're happy to give you testimonials and they're happy to give you referrals, your job is done. If they're not, then you have to dig deeper and find out why someone is not willing to give you that testimonial. So 6 key takeaways very quickly. A strong brand actually works silently on your behalf because it goes through a word of mouth process. You have to engage when the going is good and more when it's bad. You have to establish your reputation. You have to tell people what you stand for and you have to stick to it. Social media, you have to be very careful. Please measure your brand popularity or recognition, and consistency is key. If you say one thing and do the other, you're going to find yourself in all kinds of trouble. In closing, I'll leave you with this quote from Benjamin Franklin, that it takes many good deeds to build a good reputation and only one bad one to ruin it. Thank you so much.